Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. Super excited to have some dynamic leaders in the various nonprofit sectors with us today. Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited, and we want to get started in the interest of everyone's time. Today, we are hosting a dynamic panel of leaders in the nonprofit space. The Fundraising Academy is bringing live to you today Black Philanthropy Month, evolving affinity into impactful giving. And that is what we'll be talking about this month. As we all know, is Black Philanthropy Month, and we want to make sure that everyone is knowledgeable about not only the month, but some of the ways that some of our leaders in the various fields are making significant impact and highlighting ways that you too can amplify your cause. Before we begin, just want to let you know that Fundraising Academy provides a variety of webinars that are free to everyone, and we want to be able to assist you with impacting your cause by amplifying it, by looking at the cost selling cycle. The cost selling cycle, similar to the donor cycle, provides initial steps that help you amplify giving within your organization, moving them through the process, because ultimately our goal is to ensure that we're securing philanthropic support for our organizations and making them grow. And I am your moderator today, LaShonda Williams, and I have the honor and privilege of being one of the trainers with Fundraising Academy. And as I shared before, we offer a variety of free trainings available for everyone in the nonprofit space. No matter what your role is, there are some webinars that are available to you to help you make sure that you're doing the best that you can do with your organization. My experience lies in higher education as well as general nonprofit, and I've just recently joined the medical sector. So I have a variety of experiences similar to our panelists today. So you'll receive unique perspectives, which will help amplify your skill set, your knowledge base, and strategies as you're moving forward throughout the year to amplify your organization. I want to introduce to many of you, some for the first time, my group of friends. You know, if you saw the LinkedIn post, I shared with you that we've had some really great conversations and opportunity to prepare as a team. And these individuals, I'm very proud to say, are not just my colleagues, but they're also my friends. And I've known them all for a while. And when I tell you they possess a wealth of knowledge, this day, you are going to not only get to know them better, but you're going to leave with concrete examples of how you can amplify your cause. And so I'll begin with my dear friend, Ms. Judith Coleman, who is CFRE. Judith possesses a variety of experience, and she currently serves as the Associate Director of Covenant House, Illinois. And in that space, she has done some dynamic work. Some of those highlights includes orchestrating a variety of different impactful organizations, specifically starting initiatives as a pioneer for high-level engagement with some of her donors, and also organizing and beginning some planned giving, which all of our organizations really need. In addition to that, she's very active within her community with several service organizations, one including our sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she is recently a member of the Links organization, which many of us are familiar with. Judy holds a BA from Hokie College out of Illinois, Mount Hokie, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, say it again, Judy.
Mount Holyoke, it's in Massachusetts.
Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts, and she has a BA, and she is here today about the business. And so up next, we have my dear friend, William Bryant Jr., who is very busy all the time, and his title definitely precedes him. Just so that you know, William is the first African-American and person of color to serve as the Scout Executive CEO for the Mobile Area Council of Boy Scouts of America, which is a tremendous honor. And it speaks to not only his wealth of knowledge, but his impact within the community, having raised over $400 million throughout his career. And his commitment to service is quantifiable, as he's also been honored by several organizations, and he's a member of many organizations, including that one of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the Urban League, 100 Black Men, and the list goes on and on. He is a proud graduate of an HBCU, Grambling State University, where he received his BS, and also an MBA from Oglethorpe, not in nonprofit, which is located in Atlanta, Georgia, which is also an HBCU. And also joining us is Precious Freeman, CFRE. Precious and I happened to meet during our CFRE journey, and she too possesses a wealth of knowledge. She currently serves as the Vice President of Engagement for Measures for Justice, which is a tremendous role and very impactful as you're thinking about some of the things that are happening in America today. She possesses a variety of experience that ranges from smaller nonprofits to the larger sector, but some of her career highlights includes her pride in being able to provide free workshops within the community for individuals about fundraising and wellness and cultivation, all the things that are most important to us and to our communities. She's also really passionate about community-centric fundraising and making sure that our communities have what they need to thrive. And last, but definitely not least of her many accolades, one that she wanted us to share with us today is that she worked many years for the George Washington Carver Museum. And during that time, she was able to cultivate a lot of relationships and also help put the organization on the map and securing additional philanthropic support and higher level engagement. Last, but definitely not least, we have the Dr. LaShawn Pryor, who currently serves as the AVP at Delaware State University. He is highly known for many things. Of those things, while he's been at Delaware State, he manages not only the team, but he also works with the foundation. He has a variety of experience in HBCU collegiate giving, ranging from annual giving to major gifts. In addition to that, he's also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated and a graduate of Stillman College, and most recently earned his ED at his current workplace, which is Delaware State. So thank each of you for being here with us today. And we are going to go ahead and get this started now that everyone knows who is on. And we want to hear from you as participants. We'd like to know from you if you could participate really quickly in this poll. What is the size of your organization? And this gives us a gauge so that we're able to determine, what types of examples we need to use. And we want to make sure that we're familiar with our audience. And we are getting a mix. So far, we're looking at a variety of different size organizations. And it looks as though the majority of the organizations are either we have an even tie right now between the larger sizes and the smaller sizes. So we'll definitely be meeting you in the middle with our wonderful panel that has a variety of knowledge. So it's showing that we have 39% that are in the 1 to 10 size org. We have 11 to 20 that are at the 14% response, and those that are in an organization 21 to 50 are at 6%, and those that are 51 plus are at 41%. So thank you for all being here. And we have one other question that we want to share with you, and that is looking at your years of experience, because experience matters. And we want to make sure that we're able to provide enough examples for those of you that may be newer to fundraising, and for those of you that are veterans. We are looking forward to you sharing your insight at the end of today's session in the chat. So we have a variety of experiences, and we'll wrap up the poll in just a few moments. We're looking at 0 to 2 years at 27%, 3 to 5 years at 24%, and those that are 6 to 10 years at 11%. So we've got the majority of our participants 11 plus years. So we have a lot of champions on here and experts. So we're looking forward to sharing with you, and we are going to dive right in today. So let's kind of begin the conversation. And I want to start with the very first question, which is one of those questions to get everyone engaged in the thought process about what it is that we're doing today. As you know, it's Black Philanthropy Month, and one of the reasons why we're having this session is to highlight not just African American or Black giving and donations, but also to encourage support of said organizations that are led by African Americans. So as we're diving into the conversation, the very first question I'd like to have in dialogue with each of you is for you to think about and describe your ideal future for Black giving in social finance. So describe your ideal future of Black giving or social finance. And we'll just kind of start the round robin with William. Chime in, please. You're on mute.
Thanks, LaShonda. Thank you for the invite for this great panel discussion of Black philanthropy. I'll tell you, one of the things that I always a pet peeve of mine is that we don't assume if people can give or not. One of the things that we do as fundraisers, 90% is research. So with research, we have to make sure that we research everyone. So we can't assume if someone won't give. We can't assume they don't have the capacity to give. And we all know that the number one reason why people do not give because they're not asked. And many times we don't ask people who are covered to give because we assume they never might have the capacity. But now the day is changing. The capacity is there. So my future is for everyone to be asked because everyone can have opportunities to give. And so the capacity, don't assume, and be bold when you make the ask as well, because we're here. There are many, many major donors in the African American community, and they're there, but you got to find them.
And you're right, you have to find them. And so part of the finding process is discovery with the cost selling cycle and asking those essential questions that help you with qualification. So Judy, if you could chime in with us on that, what is the future you see?
I would say my ideal future includes changing the narrative around Black giving, as to tag on to what William was saying in his point, and changing the narrative not only with other people, but also within ourselves. Again, to his point of don't be afraid to ask and don't assume. But I would also highlight the history of generosity within Black communities, and then have increased engagement with Black philanthropists and donors. And I would encourage those donors to invest in Black-led organizations, or I would say organizations that serve a majority of Black people, Black individuals, in order to strengthen their capacity, also scale their impact, and to focus on addressing systematic issues that have a measurable impact, not just a one and done.
Completely wholeheartedly agree with you. Systematic change, and then also making sure you have those quantifiables are really important as we're thinking about giving holistically. And William brought up one of the most valid points, and that is that discovery and that process of identifying those individuals and making sure that we take our time and do due diligence in qualifying them and not counting them out. And most recently, we've seen a wave of more African-American contributors in the political system as we're making waves each time over the past several years. There's been a significant influx of African-American donors in the political space, but we also want to amplify them with the service organizations, which are really important and impact our community. Would either Precious or LaShawn care to chime in on that one?
I would just quickly say awareness. I think Judith and William really touched on the key points that I would really kind of mention, but I would just kind of say the awareness, because there are a lot of Black donors and philanthropists. There are a lot of organizations who want to support Black causes, but you have to be aware, and in some cases, they have to be more intentional about making sure that they generate that awareness for themselves, so that it's easier to find for people to find them and to find out about what they do in order to support.
And that is the perfect lead in for the next question. And so my next question is, we're thinking about fundraising holistically. We all know that people give to people, and relationships are very important in the philanthropic space. And so it's important because they determine the outcomes, how well you cultivate and engage prospective donors. But not only that, what you do to sustain them and keep them informed on their philanthropic support and the impact of their giving. So each of you are involved in several organizations, and I mentioned that earlier. You all are very active within your communities, and you're active on behalf of your organizations. What are some things, LaShawn, that you do to establish and foster meaningful relationships with leveraging those affinity groups? And I know Delaware State has tons of affinity groups.
Oh, thank you. So I'm actually going to take this from maybe a slightly different angle than maybe what the anticipated answer might be in examples. For me, it's a little bit more foundational.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to start in terms of looking at opportunities and expectations. So your organization, what opportunities do you have available or can you make available that's going to allow you to engage, foster the relationships, cultivate the relationships with individuals to get them more information about what you do and your mission, whether that's a board opportunity, whether that's advisory councils, whether that's mentorship opportunities. And if you're, depending, that's a lot of different areas that you could have depending on your type of organization. But the other piece of that, I would say, is setting realistic expectations. So we are in a need funds now type of environment. And you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. So where a lot of times leadership, they expect philanthropic results, but as fundraisers, we may not have necessarily cultivated the relationships that's going to deliver those expectations and those results. So as you identify donors, you're looking at, what are your expectations of the donor in terms of their capacity, what are their interests, but then also what are the expectations of the organization. So you kind of have that two-way street that you want to get to know the donor, but you want to also have the donor know that the organization so that you can kind of set those expectations. And then once you align those expectations, then we can really start to look strategically and be intentional about how do we cultivate that relationship and how do we engage that donor. So for me, I know we're talking about like the affinity piece. I'm not as concerned about the affinity as I am the process of deepening the relationship and the engagement. If you went to school, you're an alum, you have an affinity. You may have known a grandparent or a friend or somebody that went to the school or served as a part of your organization, that you have an affinity. And I think maybe later on in some of the questions, and I'll kind of save some of the statistics, but it's not really so much about the affinity. You want to be realistic in terms of what you expect and looking at the opportunities that you can really have some meaningful relationships and fostering the relationships with your potential donors with the organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Precious. And then William, please chime.
So my angle I'll take is about becoming known as a connector who genuinely understands your network. I think that's super vital. So people know that when you bring them an opportunity to give or collaborate, it means something. And they feel like, I have to do this. Precious is asking me to do this. I know that she wouldn't bring me something that's off mission, that makes no sense for me. So I think that's a big part of it. And I'll add that takes an abundance mindset. So instead of viewing our affiliations as resources to exploit or pilfer through, we can focus on matching missions and finding meaningful ways to collaborate and create mutual benefits. So when we do this, we're making sure that we're tapping into these relationships that we have across these multiple organizations, and we're all able to move our good work forward together. I think that's the biggest piece. And again, just making sure you know that you sit on 5 different boards and you know all these different influential folks, and you're not just pilfering, but again, listening, leaning in, finding out what your network needs, understanding your organization's needs. And that's to Dr. Pryor's point, and making sure that you're bringing these meaningful opportunities to them, again, so that you can move their work forward just as you're moving your work forward.
Absolutely. William?
So for me, with so I had the opportunity to work at the national office for 4 years, and I was over national partnerships. So we have partnership MOUs with the 100 Black Men, different fraternities, Alpha, Kappa, Sigma, and things like that. But one of the things when I went into these councils, I let them understand what goes on in Atlanta. So the 100 Black Men is a great supporter of the scouting in Atlanta. But however, if you're in New Jersey, that outlook may be different. You may want the 100 Black Men, some of the members should be on your board, to be marriage counseling, things like that. So it's not a one-stop shop for all, right? So even though you have an affinity group, you're in affinity groups, but every chapter is different. And so you can't go into Chicago or LA or New York or Mobile saying that we need to do this. We have a national MOU. No, that's not how we work here. So I think understanding the dynamics of that each affinity group has a subgroup, and that's the subgroup you have to infiltrate. Because if not, if you try to do one thing for all, it's not going to work. Everyone likes to be customized. Everyone likes to be recruited. Everyone likes to massage their ego, right? And so you have to do that to make sure for the betterment of your organization. So I would just say that with the affinity groups, they are great. It's great to have those affinity groups and be supported and have your voice heard throughout the land about your movement and your mission. But however, you have to customize it to each subgroup of that affinity group.
Personalization is absolutely key as we're talking about relationships, because everyone wants to feel valued. And so with that value, Judith, please chime in. Unmute.
You'd think I would be able to know that I was on mute by now after all these years. I agree with William, but I would also say that the affinity groups that I have been involved with, that I'm involved with, and I'm thinking of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and certainly the links, they have national initiatives and areas that they are interested in. And so with these different organizations, I see that it's important to do some research and see where they are and what they're interested in. For example, with the links, there are national initiatives in 5 facets. I'll talk about it a little bit later. But the local chapters have to work within those facets, those areas that have already been identified. And so it's important that you know what they are interested in doing in the first place. And for example, in organizations that I've worked with over the years, our mission didn't always fit in with organizations that I'm involved with. And to Precious's point, you can't try to force it, try to put a round peg in a square hole. If the connection is not there, if the interest is not there on the other side of the table, then that's not something we're going to be able to connect to.
So it's really important to make sure that as we're thinking about the various affiliations and prospective donors specifically, that we are honing in on that linkage, the ability and interest, and making sure that they are all in alignment and they speak in concert together, creating a harmony, which creates that foundation for the philanthropic giving that we're all seeking in essence. So with that in mind, thinking about it a little bit closer, we want to take one step deeper into this dive. Let's think about some of the factors of the Black future that will drive giving as we're thinking about social finance, specifically promoting wellness and equity within the Black community, within Black families. What are some things that you think are really important? And Precious, you are VP of Engagement. So we're going to start with you because you are making big waves in social justice.
Okay. Every time you say that, I have to remember, yeah, I guess that comes with great responsibility, just like everyone on this panel. We all have a lot of responsibility with these titles. But to answer your question, there's this saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And I think the future of Black giving will rhyme with the past. Like historically, we've known that our communities, we've known what our communities need. We've responded with urgency and precision. And by that, I mean, if your block needs food, we stand up a soup kitchen overnight. It can be in someone's kitchen. There's no permits, but we're going to make it happen. Same thing if there needs to be some after school care, we will stand up a program overnight. So meeting those needs precisely and urgently is something that we've historically done. And Dr. Tyrone Freeman's book, Madam C.J. Walker's Gospel of Giving, goes into great detail about this. There's also an idiom that will give the shirt off of our backs. And I think that's also a big part of our past. Much of Black giving is rooted in spiritual principles. We give generously of our time and our financial resources in ways that are oftentimes deeply sacrificial. And that goes back to giving the shirt off your back. For example, in many of our communities, it's not unusual to give 10% of your income, gross income, sometimes even more, even if you don't have it. And I think it speaks to our faith and our deep commitment to helping those who suffer the most, even if we are in that number. That's who we are as a people. And I do believe that we are going to see this. It's part of our past. We'll see it in the future. Looking ahead, I think what's crucial is more support by Black-led organizations. And to Judith's point, also organizations that are primarily focused on Black folks. Support for Black-led organizations that are meeting community needs with urgency and precision, like we have historically done. I also expect there to be a growing desire for those who were raised to tithe to seek ways to give their 10% still to their church of their choice, or even to organizations that are doing work that aligns with those values and addresses our community's most critical needs. Again, I keep saying it, but urgency and precision is how we have always moved. That's how we've gotten things done. That's how movements are created. That's who we are. And I just think that's who we're going to be.
Definitely. I think the philanthropic space for the African-American community is deeply rooted in the religious sector. And you hit it spot on when you talked about the 10% tithe, and that's regardless of what your salary may be. And so sometimes when we see these more significantly large transformational gifts, we're not actually thinking about, well, what percentage of that person's wealth are they really giving? So that is something that to be said. And so it's really important that we are good stewards of those said funds. And so LaShawn and Judith, let's hear you all chime in on that. We want to hear a little bit more.
I think Precious did a very good job to at least starting it off. But just to kind of reiterate what Precious was saying. So what I would say is it's really about the message. And as an organization, how are you connecting your message with Black philanthropists and Black donors, right? So Denver Foundation, there's an article, February, I believe, 2023, but they said Black households gave 25% more of their annual income than white households. And then in addition to that, they said nearly 2/3 of Blacks are giving to causes and organizations that total in excess of maybe like $11 billion, somewhere in that neighborhood. So Black philanthropy is strong. We're giving, we just may not be giving to your cause or your organization. But it's why it goes back in terms of as we build in the future, your messaging, how are you connecting your message that's going to resonate with Black philanthropists and Black donors for us to actually be able to give to you. That's why I kind of went, when I was on the first question, I was kind of talking about affinity. We can be affiliated with several different organizations, but it takes a lot more than us being affiliated and having an affinity for us to give to you. And I'll quickly just kind of share this, not specifically with Black donors, but in terms of giving as a whole from the higher education standpoint. Ruffalo Noel, they released their 2024 alumni survey recently. And so, and this is just alumni donors in general, but I think it's something we can kind of really glean and take to account of our conversation. But 77% of alumni from institutions in general, they give to causes that they care deeply about, and causes that they have some type of strong affiliation with, and that's really been engaged, that they really have a deep concern about. And then 54% of the alumni said they never give to their alma mater, but they donate to other causes. So again, it comes down to the message of your organization. And as we move into the future, you really have to be intentional. How is your message going to relate to Black donors and for our giving?
Mhm.
I think it's really important what you said there, Dr. Pryor, thinking about, the messaging. It's paramount for securing or initiating the relationship. But moreover, we have to be mindful in this particular day and time that we are, as we're storytelling, that we're practicing ethical storytelling. And with that, making sure that we are not only highlighting our organization and its need, but more so the work that we're doing and the impact it's making in a way that demonstrates the totality of the organization without exploitation of individuals and or recipients of said services. So that's really important and paramount. And then we also want to be mindful as we're thinking about engagement, and each of you have engaged a variety of different types of donors, whether they be major gift prospects or if they're principal gift prospects, but meaningful engagement is what's going to move the needle. The stats that you shared attribute to that. Yes, I can be a part of your said organization, but have you participated in some meaningful engagement that's really going to make you feel like you're a part of it? And we're going to talk a little bit about some experiential engagement a little bit later in the conversation. Does anyone else care to chime in on this one? Or are we ready for the next question?
I'd like to make one point and give an example. I think that Black donors are more informed and sophisticated. I think we would all agree there. But they're looking for organizations that have the cultural competency to meet their unique perspectives.
Yes.
I have never worked personally, well, I take that back. I work for one Black-led organization. Almost all of the organizations that I've worked for have served a primarily Black clientele. And, you know, you reach out to Black donors and philanthropists, and you think that they are going to be interested in some level in supporting this organization because they feel that it supports their community. But they are still looking for these mainstream organizations to have cultural competency. I had a donor that I was working with for 3 or 4 years. They had a lot of capacity, a Black couple. They were able to give us lots of money. I asked them to invest in our capital campaign. I sent them some information. And this was when I first started working at Covenant House, Illinois, 4.5 years ago. And the wife is the one that I had been working with. She called me back a couple of days later, and she said, she let me know that she would not be investing in our capital campaign because at that time we had no Black people on our board. Now, this is something that I had said to the leadership, to the whole board, in person, as well as the leadership of the organization itself, the CEO and the other leaders. And I said to them, I told you this was going to make a difference. And so that is just a painful example for me of Black donors being more sophisticated and expecting more.
Definitely expecting more in terms of equity, inclusion, and diversity holistically when you're thinking about your boards, because most of us would like our donor base to be not only reflective of the community for which it serves, but thinking about the melting pot that we live in. It's really important that we are not only strategic with those relationships, but we're also inviting those that have that strong interest and that have demonstrated support in similar or like organizations. And with that being said, you know, one of our primary areas that we really want to hone in on is that transitioning into philanthropic support. So if you all each could kind of share with me today, what are some of the ways that you've cultivated individuals and or companies or organizations or board members with amplifying your causes? You know, each of you have a very wide portfolio in which you dive into, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you are fostering and cultivating those relationships.
Yes, well, thanks, LaShonda. One of the things I want, how I really cultivated relationships that work, because many times when you volunteer, when you work for a nonprofit and you volunteer for a nonprofit, especially if you're in development, everyone wants you to fundraise for their nonprofit, right? I'm like, that's a conflict of interest. But however, if you see an alignment, so when I was in Atlanta, I had the opportunity to run for president of the Urban League Young Professionals. The Urban League has been a great supporter of scouting for many, many, many years, ever since Dr. Whitney Young. And so when I went to my CEO, I told him that I was looking to run for president of this organization, yada, yada, yada. He said, you have our full endorsement if you win. So I won. And so with that, I was able to leverage some of our donors that have an affinity for organizations such as the Urban League, and then also vice versa as well. So it was a great opportunity. It was the best 2 years of my life in reference to raising funds, not only for my job, but also for an organization that I truly, truly love, of the National Urban League. So, having those, telling those stories on where the dollars goes, how can you be effective? What can you do to also not only give your treasure, but also your time? I think so many times when we do research as professional fundraisers, we automatically want to get the money, which is great. I'm all because no money, no programs all day, no money, no programs. But however, certain times you can have that in-kind donation. Someone can donate a facility for you. Someone can donate the catering for you and things like that. So not everything is about the dollar. And that's hard saying it from a fundraiser, but it's not at sometimes. But you have to leverage, and it goes back to research. The most important thing we can do as development directors, executive directors, is do your research. Research. I probably spend 80% of my time doing research, because without research, I can't make the right acts for that particular organization or for that particular donor and things like that. And then see who you're going to take with you. People give to people, not to organizations. And LaShonda, you talk about storytelling, and then we got to go to story living. How can you bring your world? How can you bring that donor into a unit that they can see where their money goes? So we got to stop about, storytelling is great, but we need to transition to story living.
Love that. Judith, chime in.
Yes, research is most important. The 80-20 rule applies here. 80% of your time, and I'm talking about major donors, of course, but 80% of the time that you spend on a single donor should be on research and planning your strategy, and 20% actually interacting with them. I look for connections with individuals because I've worked primarily with major donors throughout my career. But I have found over the years that permission-based asking is very effective. So asking them, so how often would you like to be contacted? How would you like to engage with us? How would you like to be stewarded? May I talk to you on such and such day about investing in our capital campaign? Particularly with those solicitations, I find that permission-based asking is effective because they're ready. And sometimes when I talk to people, I'll say, this is not a solicitation call. I'd really like to deepen our connection. You seem like you like us. I'd like to ask you some questions. And then at some point to let them know, I'd like to ask you about investing in such and such. Is this okay on this date? Give me a time. And so they will let you know, no, I'm not giving you any money. Or they will hopefully say, yes, this date is good at this time. Call me, meet with me, and let's talk about that.
You're spot on. Permission based. I love that. That's a fantastic way to phrase that, especially as we're thinking about discovery questions to deepen the relationship. Because as you shared, if you don't have that initial buy-in and asking the right line of questions to start fostering or creating that relationship, then it will not move. And that we want to make sure that we're going through the moves management cycle, but we also want to be able to personalize those moves. And that 80-20 is spot on for supporting effective cultivation and transitioning it into a successful ask. There are a variety of different things that, we can talk about as it relates specifically with that transition. But one of the other things that I'd like us to kind of take a moment to look at is engagement a little bit more. Want to dive one step deeper with the engagement text into thinking about that from a standpoint of each and every one of us are a part of organizations, and each year our goals change. when you have achieved the milestone the previous year, we still have to stretch a little bit further the subsequent year. So with that in mind, you're looking at your donor base, you are doing your research, you're identifying individuals that have even more capacity and those that also may not have come close to meeting capacity. So let's talk just a little bit about what are some strategies that small shops can possibly implement to amplify giving from the standpoint of upgrading those donors. And Judy, I'd like for you to start because you led with some really great dialogue about that permission-based giving.
So I call it letting someone else do the work.
All right now.
I was thinking specifically about when you asked that question and talking about what smaller shops can do. So I would say get others to help. So you can ask board members or friends of the organization, for example, to host informational events and invite people in their network to come and learn about you. This worked well with an organization that I was with when I was living in St. Louis, and one of our board members held a meet and greet with friends and neighbors, and as a result, we recruited 2 new board members over time, and we also got several new repeating donors. I would also say cultivate volunteer events. Again, this is something that smaller shops can do. Cultivate volunteer events for current and prospective donors to give them a front row view of the work that you do. And often where individuals volunteer, their money goes. Where their work goes, their money follows. And particularly with current donors, to remind them, for example, of why they are giving to you. This is a way to help them see, oh yeah, I could give a little bit more, and open the door, I think, for us to be able to ask for more from donors. One last thing I'll share that I do is work smart on the things that you're already doing. So, for example, we all send out acknowledgement letters and emails. And what we do is change the focus of the acknowledgement letter every month. So not only does it say no goods and services were, accepted and you can take this much for your taxes, but it also is a way to communicate impact of their gift and what they've helped you do. And you can just feed them every time you send out a letter, feed them a little bit about your program and the work that you do.
I am so happy that you said that there's customization each month, because I'm a monthly donor for a said organization. And there's nothing worse than the monthly donor receiving that exact same letter or email every single month. So it's really important that we do take the time to do the customization and making sure that there's a focus, because it creates an opportunity to strengthen the engagement of the individual. So even if I've not had an experiential opportunity to engage with you, at least I will have updates on my impact, and then I will know that you're being very intentional in making sure that I know that you are a good steward of said funds. And it's also a mini impact report. If you think about it, it's an incremental impact report, which means that over time, the donors, when you come back to them a year later and it's time for LaShonda to renew her monthly giving, then, LaShonda might take it from $10 to $20 a month, because she has seen that growth, because she's been engaged in a way that is conducive to what she can do in terms of the timing. So with that in mind, there's a couple of other different ways, and, major gift event fundraising can sometimes be controversial. But I saw William Bryant talk about sponsorships and all kinds of things at AFP Icon. His session was entitled "Show Me the Money." So William, hone in on major gift event fundraising. Give it to us.
All right, thanks, LaShonda. I'll tell you, one of the things that when a participant or a golfer or a shooter go to any event, they want to have an experience. Yeah, you're going to get the sponsorship, you're going to pay for your team or for your foursome. What set your event apart from anyone else? And you have to be creative. Every year you have to be creative. So one of the things what I did, because we have a plethora of golf tournaments around the Gulf Coast, a plethora of ones, and some are really good, great attendance and things of that nature. But can you walk us away and say, man, I had an experience at that event. I gave a lot of money, but I had an experience. So one of the things that I did, I reached out to some of my resources and decided to, on every other hole or 3 of the holes, have an experience. So we may have a vodka experience at one hole. So you have a signature cocktail, have some music playing and things like that. On the other hole, you may have a bourbon experience. Another hole, you may have a cigar experience. And then your items, what you give the participants, as far as something that, so everyone, sometimes get a hat, get a shirt and things like that. But have you ever received some Pro V1 golf balls? Probably not at a golf tournament, but every participant will receive a box of Pro V1s. Something, and so if you're a golfer, Pro V1 is the top line. So you come to a tournament that you have an experience. Now, one of the things also, you have to have a great location. So we have ours at an exquisite location that people want to come to. So I think that's one of the things also, that the demand is there. So we sold out our golf tournament this year in less than 3 months. And our golf tournament is in November. So the experience, getting some things that you use your resources, but having that experience, because yes, you're going to bring in the money, but if you want a repeat customer, a repeat sponsor, they want to see change. They want to see that where your money going is making a change. But also those participants that come to your event, those are potential major donors as well. So that's a prospect list. So I have a prospect list every year of new donors, right from the golf tournament or the sporting clays tournament.
That is excellent. William, you that experience. I'm not a golfer. However, he sounds like that's going to be a very exquisite experience. And that is what donors want, as we're talking, and prospective donors, as we're talking about experiences, personalization. We want to experience something unique, something different. So for some of us that may be a different type of service organization, having mocktail nights. I mean, I love a good event with mocktails, because mocktails work very well. And just thinking of very creative things, and also specifically knowing your audience. So when you are identifying these specific types of events, I'm not going to call them exclusive, I'm going to call them inclusive opportunities to engage at a higher level, understanding what it is that particular constituency would like to have access to. And access creates an opportunity for you to also engage them with your organization. And I'd like for Precious, come on, chime in with some re-engagement, because I know you've done a lot of work within the Alabama community. So talk to us about some re-engagement and upgrading.
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing what a lot of folks are saying, but going back to showing your work, when your events can also do that, show your work, get back to some of the tried and true. I had the opportunity to work with an organization called Woodlawn United in Birmingham, and they're a part of the Purpose-Built Communities Network. And I would say one of the most impactful network organizations that are part of that group. And a big thing was we were building affordable housing, schools, you name it. You can talk about it to your donors, you can tell the story, but bringing them to community to see it for themselves is a game changer. And having events where they have to come to that community and interact with the folks who live there ends up being mutually beneficial. And the last thing I want to add is with corporations, they want to retain good talent, and finding meaning in your work is a big part of retaining good talent. So partnering with our missions helps them tremendously. And I want to make sure they're not just doing us a favor. We are doing them a favor. So it may be just another gala to you. And I know that there's a lot of controversy around whether or not we should continue with events, but it may be just another gala. But for the corporate sponsor, they're discovering new ways to show their employees how their hard work and profit lead to good things in the community. Even if those things aren't directly tied to the organization's offerings. So it's a win-win. And then, of course, again, post-event, there's still that follow-up and relationship cultivation, a lot of the tried and true best practices. The cycle is endless, but I also think the possibilities are endless with events.
Absolutely. LaShawn, I know you all do a lot of different things. And I'll tell you a little bit about LaShawn. He's kind of shy today. Delaware State happens to host one of the most phenomenal conferences I've had the pleasure of attending when I was in the higher ed space. They host the Black Philanthropy Symposium each year. What year was it? It's like 15 or so. How long have y'all been doing it, long and strong?
Well, 2025 will be 15 years, but I think it was like 2016 when we actually think we met.
Yeah, so he's got lots of experience on a variety of different levels. So chime in, LaShawn, share with us some of the things that you all do.
When it comes to events, I would echo, and it looks like I'm gonna have to come to Mobile to play golf.
I know, right? You just giving me a reason to buy the shoes. I'll be dressed accordingly.
Exactly, but I agree. Definitely, the experience is because you want donors to come in, you want people to support, whether it's sponsorships or people that's giving on site during the event. But you want people to have that experience. But for us, some of the things that we've done, and I know LaShonda was talking about our HBCU Philanthropy Symposium that we convene HBCUs, but I'm going to use an example of our scholarship ball that we do every year, which is our signature event for scholarships, which really is kind of like the party of the year for Delaware, for the state. But we actually use it to kind of help amplify our sponsors and our contributors and our donors, especially our corporate sponsors. So using the scholarship ball, so we started doing an awards presentation, and we don't really tell them who it is. We just make sure that they get there. We might change that, but we actually will do like a corporate partner of the year award, community partner of the year. Sometimes that may be a corporate sponsor, depending on the year. But that's really been helpful. One, it creates a little bit of competition between other supporters, because now everybody kind of wants to be on that stage. Everybody wants to be selected to have that recognition, but it amplifies what they're doing to their leadership. Oftentimes, obviously, the president and the CEOs a lot of times are signing off on a lot of the more significant sponsorships and support, but a lot of times the leadership within the organization and the corporation do not always necessarily know exactly what they're doing. So it gives them a chance to bring those additional leadership in for them to be able to see on stage, get the photo op, and amplify their message, which then, to some degree, it creates that, okay, well, what's next? What can we do that's next? So that's one of the things that we've done with the sponsorships. But I will quickly just kind of mention in terms of one of the things you're talking about as major gifts. I would say listening to what the donors want. And I'll just kind of share this example, high level to some degree. So we have an alum that I've been working with who had an experience some time ago with a case he actually won a Supreme Court case. And so we started talking with him, getting to know him, ideally based upon his industry and his business. Initial thought would have been to have him connect with our agriculture team in terms of some of the things we're doing around agriculture, because his business is more agriculture related. But as we talk with him more and getting to know him more, his interest, and in part because of his experience going through the case and with the Supreme Court, is he's really passionate about minorities being able to get into the law field to have more attorneys and more lawyers produced. Nothing about agriculture or nothing about his actual business piece, but that's his passion. So working with him, being very flexible, we actually created a mock trial team, because he was very interested in having a mock trial, because his son in high school was very involved with a mock trial. And so we've started to translate that within the university, which resulted in so far a 3-year commitment to continue supporting the work of building out this mock trial team. And obviously there's potentially more down the road as we continue to build that. So I just wanted to mention that it's very important to really listen in terms of the donors, and not necessarily kind of take face value of the initial conversation and be like, oh, I have the perfect person they need to be introduced to. I have the perfect idea and the perfect concept for the perfect proposal. It may have nothing totally to do. So take the time to really delve into the conversation to understand what that individual is really passionate about.
And you're spot on. And so for those of us that may be working at a little bit smaller shops, and you may not necessarily have the time to manage a substantial number of individuals and getting to know them with that specialty and that customization, one of the things that I've done that has been pretty effective for me, and each of you can feel free to chime in, is I've done surveys that are based not solely on giving, but relationship building. So not only identifying key information that you'd like to receive, just to make sure you have a comprehensive profile, but also creating that space for them to provide you some qualitative responses, those open-ended questions, those permission-based questions, to allow you to be able to not only identify what's most important to them, and then also be able to develop a priority list so that as you are trying to make your way through this countless list of individuals, you want to make sure that you're maximizing your time. And there also may be instances in which you use these surveys, or you have the survey data that you can create subgroups and or said categories. And so we've talked about experiences and how important it is to bring individuals closer to your organization to amplify giving. So identifying individuals that have similar attributes, likes, and particular interests within your organization, and perhaps hosting and or having volunteers to host said types of salon events that will create a touch point for you, but also be meaningful, because it's not an abundance of people, but it is a group of individuals with similar areas of passion, and it allows you to be able to touch many people in that one particular space, but also having that personalization with it being a smaller group. So for those of you that have those smaller organizations, surveys can be very effective. You want to have open-ended opportunities for responses. And then from a resource standpoint, sometimes we say, well, I don't have enough money to send that out in the mail or to have that email list. There are a variety of different software programs that'll allow you to send out mass numbers of emails at minimum pricing in terms of getting responses back. But in addition to that, if you currently have a direct mail budget, one of the things that you may want to consider is also enclosing some of those questions on your response devices. The individual may not necessarily make a gift, but it's an opportunity for them to respond, to tell you more about them and how they want to be involved with your organization. Judith, please chime in.
I would just say that I think surveys are most effective when you're not talking about giving. That you want to use it to collect other information, because you're really only going to get a gift, or only to get a significant gift that you're looking for, is through a direct solicitation, person to person, and really not any other way.
Exactly. It's all about the relationships. William, you look like you're really wanting to chime in. Share with us.
No, I would disagree. I would disagree.
Oh, fabulous. So those are some really important things that you want to do, especially for those of us that are in small shops. I want to say, in the perfect space, at least once a year, you will send out a survey so that you can secure information about your donor base. And it's also an opportunity to look at ways of how you can re-engage individuals as well. So it's really, really important that we take the time to do that. And so there are a variety of different strategies and techniques that we've talked about today to amplify giving, and as well as to cultivate meaningful relationships. There are many things that we can discuss. The list is infinite, but as we're thinking about Black Philanthropy Month specifically, so let's kind of take it one step further, and that is, why we're here today. And so I would ask each of you to respond to what is a concrete action that you will take, because each and every one of you are change agents in your community through your affiliations with your professional organization as well as your service organizations. What will you do to kind of help impart and embark upon change and leveraging and impacting the community holistically, from thinking about the effectiveness and ways that we can support the ideal future of Black giving? What would be your takeaway? What's your call to action as a change agent? And we'll start with who wants to go first? Go ahead, Judy. Dive
Okay.
in.
I was willing to
Oh.
throw myself
Oh,
out there.
go ahead. Go ahead,
No, go
Precious.
ahead, Judy. No, you got it, girl. All right, so I'll just make
Oh,
mine short and sweet then.
okay.
I mentioned a project that I loved so much, so dearly was the Carver Museum. Very, very, very small budget. I don't think budget really is an indicator of impact. I really don't. What I was able to do at the Carver was create opportunities for community, but also for people to come in and work with us and gain experience. Now with Measures for Justice, which is a larger shop, we have 85 team members. We also are able to create more opportunities for folks to come in and contribute to the work in meaningful ways. And so I believe that opportunity leads to a variety of outcomes, including the ability, obviously, to care for our families, to provide support for community in various ways that we care about. So a concrete action that I think I can take is to continue to mentor, find new ways and new opportunities to mentor, and also leverage my affiliations to ensure more Black people are aware of, prepared for, and have access to good opportunities, which I believe will inevitably lead to more Black giving. It comes down to opportunity to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Excellent.
Mhm. So I will continue to do one thing that I am doing right now where I work. Covenant House is for those of you who might not know, it's a federation of 34 locations in 5 countries, and we give support and services to young people experiencing homelessness and who are escaping human trafficking between the ages of 18 to 24. And so I say all of that to say that there are many opportunities because these young people need everything in life that you can think of. So what I'm doing, as I had mentioned, I touched on a little bit earlier, because I have a big mouth. And I said, we need some more Black people on this board. From the very first day that I got there, any study that you look at for Covenant House, anywhere from 70 to 85% of the young people that we serve are Black, not Black and brown, Black. And of that 70 to 85%, more than half of them, almost 2/3, are young Black men. Again, we need everything. And so what I have done is I recruit and I look for board members who look like the people that we serve. We were a Black-led organization. As of recently, not so much. But I will say that most organizations are not Black-led, but many of them serve a primarily Black clientele. And so I think we still want to bring the best. And I think, bringing the best and engaging Black philanthropists to come and join our board, be a part of our board. Covenant House, Illinois also told me, if you think this is such a great idea, then we're going to make this part of your job. You do that. Development should be in charge of board recruitment anyway, because the importance of your board is to help you raise money, make connections, and raise money. And by bringing in Black philanthropists on our board, we've had some come, we've had some go. I'm constantly building a pipeline and expanding the numbers on our board so that they bring their unique perspective to our organization that serves so many of our young people who are in need.
Absolutely. And having a dynamic board is really important. And it's a part of the lifeline of the organization. It's a major artery, as I work in the medical field now. And one of the things that you want to also be mindful of too, and I know each of you on the panel knows this, but when we're thinking about the board, and Judy, you spoke about it very eloquently, is we want to also make sure that when we're identifying these boards and we're creating opportunities, that we are making sure that we're putting measures in place to sustain the board members, having
Right.
the orientation, having the training, having the retreat, making sure that they understand the commitment that they are making to the organization so that they can help optimize and maximize your overall growth and potential. And who'd like to chime in next?
I should have went first. No, after Precious and Judith pretty much took the answers that I was going to say, but really just being conscious of making sure we help organizations that we know about amplify their message and get the resources that they need. May not necessarily be serving on their board per se, may not in some cases, may not necessarily actually be donating and giving financial resources, but in some cases where most of us, at least anywhere, are part of other organizations that could potentially support those organizations in terms of needs that they have. So I'm on a board for a credit union. So as a financial institution, understanding the needs that we have in our mission to the community, especially when it comes to Black-led organizations, making sure if they're talking about something, they have a need, that there may be a connection there that can support them, making sure that I make that connection to make sure that they get the resources that they need, or bringing other people to the table that I may know that I may not be the right person to be in leadership or on the board or part of an advisory council, but I may know somebody else who would be ideal to do that. And so really getting back to how our community used to be a long time ago and years ago, in terms of really being intentional about supporting each other, and not with everything specifically being about, what's in it for me. And I'm not trying to say that's not important. But I think as a community, as we really try to build a community as a whole, I think we have to be much more intentional in how we're trying to leverage every resource that we have to make sure that the greater good and the greater community is benefiting.
So I say Raleigh, North Carolina, Chicago, Palm Beach, Florida, Montgomery, Alabama, Macon, Georgia, Newport News, Virginia, Barstow, Oklahoma, Quincy, Illinois, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Galveston, Texas, Rockford, Illinois, Kingston, North Carolina, Kokomo, Indiana, Jacksonville, Florida, Portland, Oregon, Tucson, Arizona, Jackson, Tennessee, Houston, Texas, Columbus, Georgia, Canton, Ohio, and yours truly, Mobile, Alabama. These are the Scott executives of the 234 councils across the country that are led by African-American men and women. So my goal as it continues to the service of Black philanthropy is to make sure we highlight our individuals who are doing well. The BSA has been around since 1920. 1910. And we are my fellow colleagues around the country who are leading these councils are doing a great job. But without support from our communities, without support from corporate, from community leaders, we would not be in existence. We talk about people give to people, not to organizations. No money, no programs. So many times when you see Black-led organizations, we work double. It's hard to reach the community that we serve, but we know that the communities that we serve are the most at need. So without your support, without support from the community, without support from corporate community, we would not be in existence. So support organizations for Black, support organizations for Black organizations, and also led by executive directors as well. So just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and make sure we support everything that we do.
Yeah, it's really, oh, go ahead, Judy.
There's something that, and it came to mind when William was talking so eloquently. One of the things that I keep in the back of my mind, I don't always say it to people, but that I keep in the back of my mind is, we are the ones that we have been waiting for.
And with that in mind, we want to hear from you. We want to engage the audience. We've got lots of information in the chat. We're really excited that we have representation in a variety of different spaces and places. And so definitely want to acknowledge everyone. But because we've had this meaningful dialogue and we've covered a lot of information, we've talked about the historical context and donor motivations and how we can build sustainable, meaningful relationships with donors. We've talked about the need discovery process and asking questions that lead to permission, so that you're garnering that relationship and you're personalizing it. And moreover, we've talked and given you examples of how to amplify your giving in your community, and we've discovered a variety of different things that we can possibly do within our state organizations. So my question to each of you that are here with us in this virtual space is, what will you do to be a change agent? And I'd like to share out some of your responses. So take a moment and share with us, what would you do in this space, knowing that what we've shared in this moment in space in this time, and based on this meaningful conversation, with it specifically being Black Philanthropy Month, and we want to have actions or calls of actions throughout the year, not just this month. What will you do to be a change agent in your community to help with leveraging and creating opportunities in this space? Anyone? I'm waiting for some insight from the chat. We've gotten some really great positive feedback here that I'll share from the chat while we're waiting for some responses. Great presentation. And then we also have some insight on National Estate Planning and Awareness Week. Those are all great things, but we'd really like to hear from you in the audience. So what are some things that you'd like to know? We also are open up at this time opportunity for Q&A. If anyone has any specific questions that they'd like to ask as we are preparing to transition out for this conversation. It's really been very insightful. We've taken a very deep dive, and while we're waiting to get some responses from the chat, I want to take this time to talk just a little bit more with each of you about some of the phenomenal things that you've done. Earlier on, I introduced each of you and I gave just a couple of mild bullet stones to kind of keep it modest, because everyone, I'm certain, will be wanting to reach out and connect with you post today's session. But if you could please just take a moment, each of you, and think about, what would you say if you had to say or to define your most significant point of pride? What would that be as it relates to the work that you're doing with your organization currently and or with a previous organization? And I will begin by answering this question. For those of you in the audience who know me or may not know me, I had the opportunity to work at my alma mater for many, many years. And so during that time when I was in the annual fund space, one of the things that I really, really enjoyed was to transition that affinity into philanthropy, which we talked about earlier. And working with alumni in such a meaningful way and creating a movement. And so one of the strategies, or should I say initiatives, that I put into place that I think was most powerful and spoke to the mission of the institution and was a great opportunity to be story living, was the I Love My HBCU Month initiative, which was phenomenal. And we were able to connect with alumni and have them share their stories and why they love their institution, knowing that affinity piece, but taking it one step further and challenging them to give. And so during that time frame, as you've heard from Judith, William, LaShawn, and Precious, those initial gifts, looking at those initial gifts and creating opportunities to identify individuals in which we needed to create deeper relationships with, and to be able to cultivate those relationships. And that one particular initiative led to significant number of endowments being created through affinity groups, which help amplify opportunities for higher education and creating economic empowerment for people of color that selected to attend the HBCU. Each and every one of you, please feel free to chime in as you may. I've got Jerome Tinker here on the line, who said that a key, that I think knowledge is key, and I'll continue to educate students on the importance of philanthropy and why it is pivotal to stay connected to the institution. Absolutely. It's really, really important. And then Judith, you had a specific question asked of you. Could you share those permission-based questions again?
Oh, sure. You seem like you like us. How would you like to be stewarded? How often would you like for us to contact you? How would you like for us to contact you? What's your best way of contacting? I will even ask them, may I check in with you periodically, once, twice a year, just to see how you're doing, to let you know a little bit about what's going on with us. And then I ask, may I talk to you at some point about supporting our organization? If they already support us, may I talk to you on such and such day about ways that you can have more impact on our organization by perhaps increasing your donation? Can we do that? And then, they know when you're going to ask them to do what. So I hope that helps.
That was great. And if we can piggyback to the point of pride, you want to share anything specific?
I worked with an organization in St. Louis, and I was the volunteer coordinator. And it was an organization with CASAs, court-appointed special advocates for children in foster care. And I was the volunteer coordinator in charge of recruiting and training, screening, training, and then retaining them. It's kind of a big ask of people. And I had a process that I put in place when I first got there. And years later, I went back and I looked on their website, and it is exactly the same thing. They're still using what I had put into place in order to identify the volunteers and then recruit and train and retain them. And that was another organization that was not Black led, but no surprise that most of the children in foster care look like us. And less than half of the volunteers looked like us. So I changed that significantly in the 2 years that I was there.
Fantastic. Put some sustainability measures in place.
LaShonda, you have 2 questions in the Q&A box.
Q&A.
Yes, I do. So one of the questions is, what fundraising software do you all recommend to track annual gifts and recognize donors?
We use Razor's Edge. I love Razor's Edge, but Razor's Edge is not cheap, and everybody can't afford it, but that's my favorite one.
Yeah, we use Razor's Edge as well.
Yeah, we use Blackbaud. So Blackbaud, so people either love it or hate it, right? So I like it, and but the one thing about Blackbaud, you have to put the information in, therefore it can spit out what you need from it. So whenever you do a touch point with a donor, you make sure you log it in, because you're not going to be in your role forever, and so the next person is working on that same donor. You want to see your notes as well. So I like Blackbaud. It does what it needs for what I want it to do, by tracking, seeing their wealth strategy as well, and things who else to give to. So from that aspect, I like Blackbaud, and it does what kind of for them to do, and track their donations as well.
So the organization that I was with previously, when I got there, I inherited eTapestry, which was a Blackbaud product. And it's very, very robust, to say the least, and could be a stressor. I transitioned that team over to Bloomerang, which I think smaller shops can afford, and it's a little more user-friendly. Again, not as robust as some of the other ones, but still pretty incredible, especially with some of the communications work that I was also doing. Where I am currently, we use Salesforce, and again, it's very robust. You almost need a separate team member just to manage that. But we're able to track so much information. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the data that you're willing to input and being consistent and disciplined enough to make sure you're logging every single thing that you do. So no matter what you choose, finding integrations that will make it easy for you to log emails you send, that make it easy for you to want to go in and log this conversation you just had, all that is super helpful.
Definitely. Those are excellent tools. Also, we have another question here in the chat. Any thoughts on how we can engage our African-American millennials and Gen Z into a culture of philanthropy? Who would like to start with that answer or response, should I say?
I'll throw an answer out there, which is to create an affinity group for them. I stood up a group called YP at the Carver. It was Young Professionals at the Carver Museum. And this group of young folks were willing to meet weekly. They really organized themselves. They planned fundraisers on their own, managed every piece of the process, took great pride in their work. It was also a leadership development opportunity for them. So we made sure, again, making it mutually beneficial, that we brought in community leaders like the mayor, police chief, and that sort of thing to come in and talk with this group and learn more about what they think and what they want. Also making sure they were informing our programming moving forward, so that we could reach more millennials and more Gen Z, which I'm an elder millennial. So, or I guess we're talking about young millennials and Gen Z. So that would be my answer for that.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of kind of the focus group. Because you wanna find out what's gonna engage them and what they like and what they're going, and what's gonna have them actually take action to be engaged with your organization. And the generations are different. There may be some overlap, but there's differences in generations. But I think also the important piece is really being open-minded and being sincere about being open-minded, especially if you are a part of a more traditional type organization. Because what you hear may be very different than what you're expecting or what you've been accustomed to. And then make sure that you follow through on whatever it is that you agree with them to do. Make sure you follow through based upon those discussions as you move forward in terms of working with them.
I would say also, when you have these different special events, a gala or golf tournament, sporting place, wherever it may be, encourage your sponsors or team captain to invite a younger member on their team to come. Because many times we invite our colleagues or customers, which is great. But if we're talking about giving back and showing the younger generation on what the company do for philanthropy in the community, invite 2 or 3 with young people from your company to the gala or to the golf tournament and things like that. Introduce them to things you do that they can benefit from. It's never too early to give. I know at some university they start having their students give their freshman year. So philanthropy become a habit and not a curse, right? So those type of things that we can encourage as a development director, executive director, we can encourage those individuals that come into our events to invite those younger generations to come as well.
Definitely. And creating a culture of philanthropy begins within that organization. And we talked about how important it is that we're focused in on story living and experiential opportunities. Another way to also engage them, in addition to having them lead their own fundraising opportunities, but also inviting them to be a part of the organization. You know, we talked about diversity on boards, but there's also, when we talk about diversity, it's not just about ethnic diversity, but there's an opportunity for young professionals, creating that opportunity and or creating mentorship opportunities where they can learn firsthand and experience philanthropy from an internal perspective, and demonstrating the gift of time, which is very important, by inviting them in. And Judy mentioned this earlier about having volunteers come to the organization, because where you spend your time is also where you will invest your funds and or your treasures. So those are some of the ways that we can definitely embrace that next generation of givers. And then some of the things that I've also seen is looking at your current donor base. And for those particular donors that have children that may be higher net worth donors, inviting those children to be a part of that conversation once that relationship is stable, asking the family to, can we invite your son or your daughter? When you're getting when you're securing foundation gifts or family foundation gifts, you want to make sure that you not only know that particular relationship manager, but you want to get to know other members of that family, so that you can create a sustainability or succession plan, so that the children are familiar with your organization, and that they also become equally as invested as their parents or their grandparents were. So creating the opportunity where it becomes a family affair, so that you are intergenerationally engaging individuals and families. At this time, if we have any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go to the chat and share just a couple of things that we've had throughout the session today. We had some questions regarding software, but we've answered all of those said questions. We've also talked a little bit about the importance of giving back in the various ways that we give back. I'd like to acknowledge Lakeisha, who was here, and she indicated that she will encourage her ED to expand how the board thinks about fostering relationships with Black supporters and prospects. I will create more intentional strategies to bring Black supporters closer to our organization via the workplace and our local sororities and fraternities. Thank you so much, Lakeisha, for sharing that with us. And then we also have another comment here, and I don't want to misspeak on the name, so I will just share the comment. Taking to heart a holistic perspective and view of philanthropy, time, talent, treasure, testimony, ties, and trust. Thank you so much. So we are definitely excited that everyone is listening, and then we're also thinking about our calls to action. Another call to action here is identifying how they will continue to be engaged in a holistic perspective, making sure that their connections are being made. We've gotten a lot of accolades on things being very purposeful, and at this point we'll yield to any other questions. We have one question in the chat now that I will bring forward, which is, how do you promote racial equity within the workplace? And this will be our last question. Racial equity within the workplace. How do we promote that in the space that we're currently in a way that is meaningful, that is intentional, and that is non-threatening, of course?
I'll just jump in here. So in Alabama, a lot of folks may see that any sort of DEI efforts are really under attack. I mean, legislation has been passed where if there's any sort of DEI programming at a state-funded institution, they have to close those offices. And so we saw that at University of Alabama, where their DEI office is now the Office of Access and Engagement. And you're seeing that across the state. I think the only way to promote racial equity, it's going to have to be a part of the culture. It's going to have to be at the leadership level, the buy-in, not so much a separate department, but it's just who we are, it's how we operate. Also remembering that as a person of color, as a Black person, you can't carry the burden and the load of that. If you're in a space that's unsafe, if you're in a space where they're just not getting it right, at some point you have to decide what you're going to do, because we can't make people change. At the same time, though, every time that you have the opportunity to use your platform and your influence at work, you point out anything and everything in a way that can be understood. So you can talk about microaggressions, and there's a way to explain that. You can introduce books, speakers, all sorts of other things into the culture. I also think that advocating for employee resource groups, advocating for opportunities for employees to be heard about their experiences can go a long way. But again, it's going to come down to culture. If it's not a part of leadership and it's not a part of every manager's toolkit, then it's not going to really show up in the org in the way that you would need it to feel safe. And so then you have decisions to make. That's all I'll add to that.
You said that very eloquently. If there are not any additional shares, I'm going to begin to conclude today's session. We are very excited that you all joined us today, and we have a wealth of resources that we'd like to share with you as we're preparing to close out. We mentioned a couple of we mentioned the text. We also mentioned the organizations that these dynamic leaders are a part of, and please make sure you check out their websites. And again, the call to action this month is to make sure that you are supporting a Black-led organization and or Black serviced organization. It's really important that we do that this particular month to highlight Black Philanthropy Month, but moreover, thinking about what our overarching goal today was, and that was to make sure that we understood the historical context and motivations, and that we maximize the opportunities. We discussed the strategies, and we also want to think about ways to understand how we can better develop and forge relationships to align with our organizations to amplify giving. This dynamic group, thank you, thank you, thank you. There are not enough words I can say. Should you want to be in contact with them, each and every one of these fabulous panelists are available on LinkedIn. We have the QR code here To access them directly, please feel free to reach out and inbox them at will. We are very pleased and excited to have them to be a part of today's session. This is one of many webinars that the Fundraising Academy offers throughout the year. We have a portal. If you've not had an opportunity to join the portal, or if you want to download questions or the conversation, please use the QR code here that's available on the screen. And then we will conclude with thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Again, we want to thank our panelists for sharing their time, which is our most treasured commodity, and also want to thank each of you for joining in on this meaningful conversation. And we hope that the conversation will continue. And please know that Black Philanthropy Month is a call to action. It's not just today, it is every day. It is what we do, and make it a part of who and what you are doing each and every day. Be intentional, be thoughtful, and I'll yield one final opportunity for our panelists if they want to share anything else before we conclude today.
Thanks for asking me to participate. This was great.
Just thank you for the opportunity. So.
Yes, I echo the same. Thank you.
And with that being said, each and every one of you, I'm sorry, William, did I interrupt you?
Yeah, just said thank you.
Each and every one of you, thank you, thank you, thank you all for being here. Make sure that as you are engaging prospective donors and donors, that you are going through the cost selling cycle, starting off with identifying those prospects that we talked about. Asking those discovery questions is really important to develop the linkage, the interest, the ability, so that you can pull together a dynamic presentation and make a presentation that leads to a successful ask. And with any cycle, you must also make sure you are good stewards. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us today, and have a fantastic rest of your day. August 28th is the day that you're challenged to make a gift to support an organization that is Black-led. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you all for joining us. And I'm looking forward to more conversations with my good friends. I'll be seeing you soon. Bye.
So long, everybody.